the clearest evidence yet about the crisis on our southern border. For all the talk about illegal immigrants, this video illustrates a much bigger problem and an important question. Why aren't we going after the human traffickers and the cartels that are making millions and millions of dollars every day off of these desperate people? Just look at the hundreds, the mass of folks there in the dark. A lot of other networks spend time focusing on the sheer numbers of people crossing into the United States. Others ignore the problem altogether. Judging by this video, these folks have traveled hundreds, if not thousands of miles, sometimes tens of thousands of miles, in search of a better life, like so many of our ancestors. Behind the headlines are the smugglers, who, as we said, are making millions by the day by bringing people to the United States, making millions off the poorest and most vulnerable among us. Yet the Border Patrol, Texas National Guard, Texas State Troopers can't do anything about it because the gangs are on the south side of the Rio Grande. And the Mexican government, well, they just won't do anything about the cartels. Human smuggling equals grave danger, big money, writes Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Moving human cargo is as precious as drugs. It pays in the billions for the transnational criminal smuggling organizations. They have no concern for humanity, none. It's a money business. You might remember a couple of months ago when we went to the border and showed you firsthand the sophistication of the cartels. These are wristbands that the traffickers give migrants to identify how much they paid and what kind of services the migrants get when they come to the United States. We found stashes of these wristbands all over the place. Just this week, agents arrested 31 people in 24 hours in 5 separate smuggling incidents. In the past 3 months, agents have stopped 1,600 convicted criminals, including 12 murderers, 64 sex offenders. So keep in mind, the cartels are bringing over some really bad people, and those are just the ones that we caught. Independent journalist Ali Bradley took a lot of the video that you just saw in this piece of people waiting to cross, now joins us from Eagle Pass, Texas. She's done a lot of reporting on the cartels. You know, Ali, back to the video of the bracelets. It's so telling. It's almost like going to a nightclub in terms of how organized the cartels are in getting money from these people and then supplying a service.
Yeah, Leland, you're exactly right. I mean, it is an entire organized situation here. These people didn't end up here in these massive groups by chance, right? I mean, 400 to 500 people, 2 nights in a row, mostly Venezuelans, were in that video there. And you can see behind me, this large group just crossed over the Rio into Eagle Pass right here. And the group, let me move my camera a little bit more so you can see this group telling me that they are from Venezuela again. And we know that, you know, the cartel capitalizes on these vulnerabilities of these people, as you mentioned, Leland.
So explain briefly how it works for the folks behind you. Where do they pay the money? Who do they pay it to? What kind of tactics are they subjected to between Venezuela and where you see them right now?
Well, Leland, the people that I talked to in the caravan, I have not asked these folks that specifically, but when I talked to Venezuelans in the caravan, they were saying when they crossed the Darien Gap, that is when they first realized that they were currency, that they were part of this entire process, and that they were used as money, that they were going to be changing hands through the cartel and through their entire process. When they went through the Darien Gap, that was part of it, and then they ended up on the other side and continued.
Yeah, the Darien Gap down in Central America. How much are we talking about to smuggle people? I've heard anywhere from about $5,000 simply to cross to $25,000 if you want guaranteed transport into various cities in America. Is that a pretty fair estimate?
Well, it's kind of like a supply and demand thing, Leland, because when we saw Del Rio, we saw that huge surge of Haitian migrants come in. They were telling me it was $10,000 to $14,000 a head. But the week prior, it was $5,000. So it all just depends. Now, we know with the Venezuelan people, new policies went into place today saying that in order to get into Mexico, they have to have a visa. Mexico ended their visa-free opportunity for Venezuelans. So there's a lot of talk about the Venezuelan people are going to have to pay more to cartel because it's going to be harder to get in.
Interesting. One of the things that's going to happen to the Venezuelans is that at least some of them will be sent back to Mexico to wait for their cases. There's talk now of requiring vaccines for folks then coming into the United States for their cases and the like. Are you hearing any more from Border Patrol about how they're dealing with COVID now?
Not right now, Leland. I'll tell you this. So under Title 42, if someone is COVID positive, they cannot be sent back. So they actually weren't testing in some sectors. I mean, in part because that meant if they were COVID positive, they couldn't be sent back. That is what law enforcement officials told me. I mean, it is a mess.
Yeah, what an enormous mess. We're looking at video that you took of a bunch of people with their hands up inside, it looks like a warehouse or something like that. What's going on?
So that is an NGO. That is the non-government organization here in Eagle Pass that assists these migrants after they're processed from Border Patrol. So a lot of times in Yuma, they have a federal contract. Border Patrol will drop them off at the NGO. The NGO will process them, and from there, they're given an NTA, which is a notice to appear, or an NTR, notice to report. But Leland, get this. They're now giving ORs, which is an own recognizance. These people just are basically trusted to come back. That is what they're doing in Eagle Pass. That is what they're doing in Yuma right now.
As you talk to the Border Patrol folks, and God bless them because they work incredibly long hours and it's so demoralizing, they've been turned into processors essentially because of the sheer numbers of people coming across. How frustrated are they at the lack of law enforcement crackdown in Mexico on these cartels?
You know, I think there's frustration across the board for Border Patrol. This is not what they signed up for, Leland. So this is definitely a situation for them where they are wanting answers. They are wanting to be able to do their job. And part of that is the crackdown on the Mexico side, because this is, as you mentioned, all organized. This is not just by chance that this is happening.
Yeah, no, it's pretty stunning in terms of just the millions that are flowing into the cartels on the Mexico side, and then this ends up being the result. Arresting the illegal immigrants is a little bit like arresting people who buy the drugs. You just never get to the kingpins. Allie, it's always great talking to you, and we appreciate the time. Great work down there.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
Take care.
Stay safe. All right. Now on to another crisis. While most of the world rightly pays attention to the Russian military's preparation to invade Ukraine, the most telling sign that war is coming is actually happening in Washington. New reports indicate there are now plans to evacuate families of American diplomats from Kiev. The Russians continue to mass men and equipment on the border and make no secret of it. A lot of the video you see here, the Russian Defense Ministry is posting on Facebook so everybody can see what the spy satellites might have potentially missed. A meeting between the U.S. Secretary of State and the Russian Foreign Minister today ended in a stalemate as the Russians are taking a more belligerent tone with every meeting. Kelly Meyer in Washington this evening. She was at the Pentagon earlier. Good evening, Kelly.
Good evening, Leland. Well, this is a conversation we could have been having back in the early 1980s, but we're having this today in 2022. And while Russia is amassing more than 100,000 troops, we're sending written letters to Moscow and still hoping to use diplomacy to end this escalating conflict. I asked the Pentagon spokesperson why we aren't taking further action.
The message that we've been sending very clearly to Russia, and again, I point you back to what Secretary Blinken said just this morning, is that there will be severe consequences if Russia decides to invade or conduct another incursion.
And Leland, I have to say, many in Washington have been critical of the U.S. acting when Russia invades, saying that will be too late. And right now, the Secretary of State is on his way back after more failed attempts to de-escalate the crisis, while President Biden is set to meet with his national security team this weekend in Camp David to decide next steps. Leland?
Yeah, it's hard to imagine you're going to have a situation where once there is an invasion, that sanctions would get the Russians to withdraw. President Biden has ruled out committing U.S. troops to defend Ukraine. Then we found this on Facebook. It's pictures of all people, members of the Florida National Guard who are still in Ukraine training the Ukrainians. Are they going to stay there if war breaks out?
Well, the Pentagon says there are less than 200 Florida National Guard there on a rotational basis. They say this is something they have been doing for several years. They tell us they are going to continue watching the situation on the ground. And if they need to make decisions to protect these forces, they say they will. But as you said, an attack could come at any moment. And even the president predicted Putin will move in to Ukraine. So if he does launch an invasion, it may be too late to get these Florida National Guard members out. Leland?
Yeah, there's a couple hundred of them. Hey, Kelly, great reporting. Could be a long weekend in Washington. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, we want to continue our conversation now. National Security Advisor under President Trump, Ambassador to the United Nations under President Bush, John Bolton, is with us. Mr. Ambassador, good to see you as always, sir. Thank you. Big picture off the top. People watching at home, why should anybody care if the Russians take back what was part of the Soviet Union?
Well, all of the countries that used to be republics of the Soviet Union won their independence 30 years ago. And, you know, we have long believed, ever since 1945, the end of World War II, we've insisted that borders in Europe are not going to be changed by the use of force. Now, Vladimir Putin has already done that in Ukraine previously. And this threat, really, we're focused on Ukraine, and we should be, because that's where the most imminent possibility of war exists. But there are 6 countries stranded in a gray zone between NATO and Russia. Really, all of them are vulnerable. What's at stake here really is the security of Europe and therefore the security of the United States, and a small thing called the freedom of the Ukrainian people. They don't want to be conquered by Russia, and it's a precedent that, if it's established here, endangers really much of the rest of the former Soviet Union.
Well, it also sort of endangers the word of the United States, because there was a time that we promised that we would maintain Ukraine as a free nation if they gave up their nuclear weapons. There was a piece written in the Wall Street Journal by a former Air Force captain. In it, he said, "In For Whom the Bell Tolls," Ernest Hemingway wrote, "If we win here, we will win everywhere," talking about Ukraine. I can't think of a better way to explain why Ukraine's fate matters to NATO, the U.S., and democracies around the world. Is Ukraine as important, or is Ukraine a proxy for all the bad guys in the world to realize, for example, that Xi Jinping can't take Taiwan?
Well, I think if we fail in Ukraine, it sends a terrible lesson all around the rest of the world. And, you know, President Biden laid the table for this weeks and weeks ago when he promised not to use U.S. military force. The point here is we don't want hostilities. We want to deter Putin from engaging in them. And right now, I'd have to say that the threats of economic sanctions after the Russian military crosses the Ukrainian border don't deter Putin. He heard the same threats when he took Crimea and the Donbass in eastern Ukraine in 2014, and he got away with it essentially scot-free. And I think we have to understand as well that the Biden withdrawal from Afghanistan hangs over this like a dark cloud. And they see it in Moscow, they see it in Beijing. All of our adversaries see it as an enormous sign of weakness. So there's a lot at stake here, and as if that weren't bad enough, on Wednesday, President Biden issued what I fear will go down in history as one of the worst gaffes ever by an American president, by saying if the Russians made only a minor incursion, whatever that is, into Ukraine, we wouldn't know what to do. This is the kind of signal to Putin that figures into his calculus, increases the risk of war, doesn't diminish it.
Yeah, you wonder how much of that was a gaffe and how much of that was him saying the quiet part out loud almost, right? And the White House has been quick to try to clean it up, everything from the president to the Secretary of State to they had the chief of staff out trying to clean it up. Here's how Secretary of State Blinken, shall we say, reframed what the president thinks about things. Take a listen.
We've been clear. If any Russian military forces move across Ukraine's border, that's a renewed invasion. It will be met with swift, severe, and a united response from the United States and our partners and allies.
You don't seem to think that's a language the Russians understand.
Oh, I think they understand it. I think it shows weakness. Notice he said renewed invasion. That's right. They have the eastern Ukraine, they have Crimea, and the threatened sanctions didn't materialize. So these kinds of threats actually are counterproductive. And I think the way the media covered the cleanup effort after President Biden's remarks was very telling. There were headlines like, "White House strengthens Biden's words." Words, that's all they are. To the Russians, it looks like an engraved invitation. I think it's very serious, but I would stress again, they may not want to take all of Ukraine. They just may want to take a part of it. That's their strategy. And then say, We didn't take the whole country, and many in the West, many in the United States, many in the Biden administration will say, you know, it could have been a lot worse, and Putin will escape again.
And the other problem is if you break it, you buy it. If you get all of Ukraine, especially the western parts of it, from my time there, I learned that the threat of a real insurgency against the Russians would be serious. I just want to get back to this concept about why it's important. A man you've disagreed with in the past, Tucker Carlson, had this to say. Take a listen.
In Washington, the territorial integrity of the United States means precisely nothing. Walls are racist. We're a nation of immigrants. But the territorial integrity of Ukraine, that is something we must fight for. So our attention to Ukraine, by definition, detracts from our attention to China. But worse, it drives the Russians into an alliance of convenience, of necessity, with the Chinese government.
The argument is pretty disingenuous because, as you pointed out, President Biden said we're not going to fight for Ukraine. That perhaps might be part of the issue, but we're also not going to send them offensive weapons. We're also not going to strengthen intelligence sharing. There's all sorts of things, it seems, that we're not even doing up to fighting for it.
Right. Nor are we taking steps in advance of the Russians coming across the Ukrainian border that changes Putin's calculus in the here and now. For example, saying we will cut off any flow of gas through the Nord Stream 2 pipeline until Russia withdraws troops from countries that don't consent to their being there. And another point here, and you raised it earlier, is the relationship of China to what's happening in Ukraine. I think this nexus between Russia and China has been underway for 10 or 15 years, if not more. It's very, very dangerous for the United States, but it's particularly dangerous because they're comparing notes on what we're doing in Ukraine. Yeah, and if the Chinese perceive weakness here, they're going to say there's an opportunity for us.
Yeah, I think, Tucker may have this one backwards in terms of how dealing with Ukraine makes things happen. It's always good to see you, sir. Thank you. We really appreciate the time, especially on a Friday.
Glad to be with you. Thanks for having me.
All right. What if there was an e-cigarette for cocaine? One doctor invented it. You won't believe his explanation for why it should be legal. And sports books are winning fans' attention with free money. Sounds nice. How the push to streamline betting could seriously backfire. Welcome back. The facts of the following story are not in dispute. 20 years ago, a South Carolina man had consensual sex with another adult man. Again, consensually, they were both adults. And still today, that man must register as a sex offender. If you're thinking that doesn't make sense, that's not right, there must be something more to this story, we thought the same thing until we looked into the case of John Doe. Here's the timeline. 2001, Doe convicted under South Carolina's buggery law, essentially an anti-gay law for consensual sex. 2003, the U.S. Supreme Court declared such laws unconstitutional. 2006, Doe received a pardon, but still today, he remains a registered sex offender and just filed suit to get his name removed from the list. You can imagine how much being a sex offender screws up someone's life every day. Buying a house, moving to a neighborhood, getting a job, every part of it. Attorney Matthew Stugar represents Mr. Doe, and he joins us now. All right, counselor, is there more to this story that in some way explains why he's still on the sex offender registry?
No, not really. That's essentially it. And, you know, there were, for years, since the founding of the Republic, it was illegal in all 50 states to have gay sex, to have oral or anal sex. Sometimes those laws applied only to same-sex couples. Sometimes they applied to heterosexual couples. And some of those states slowly whittled it away. But in 2003, the Supreme Court said no state can still do this. But for everybody who was convicted before 2003, in Mississippi, Idaho, or South Carolina, was still made to register as a sex offender as of 2003. And in those states, they still are today.
All right, so you said there's a couple of hundred people who are still in this predicament. South Carolina's standard sex offender conditions: not working or entering an area within 1,000 feet of any frequented by people under the age of 18, can't live within 1,000 feet of a school, abide by curfews, not consume alcohol, and submit to alcohol testing. What is the state's explanation for keeping him on the sex offender registry? Because we called the South Carolina Attorney General. They won't tell us what their logic is.
Well, we just started that lawsuit, so we don't know what their logic is. In some ways, we think that these people are just sort of victims of bureaucratic oversight. Basically, the states have kind of refused to update their laws, whether that is out of negligence or out of homophobia. There have been some attempts in some states to repeal, already unconstitutional sodomy laws. Those have failed in some states, those have passed in others, but South Carolina, Idaho, and Mississippi all cling to their laws. So why they still require registration is unknown. I'll tell you, in Idaho and in Mississippi, they say, well, we don't know if those people were maybe, convicted of, having sex with children or having sex without consent. But they weren't convicted of any of that. They were convicted simply of having oral or anal sex, and like people like Mr. Doe's case.
You know what they were convicted of. I mean, there does seem to be some kind of lingering hatred or anger here. To make someone register as a sex offender is a pretty harsh, lifelong sentence, quite literally. That's why they have sex offender registry laws. The case you've brought centers around the 14th Amendment. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges, immunities of citizens, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. How is that going to then play out?
Well, we've had success in other states, so we expect we'll have success here. The Supreme Court in 2003 said under the 14th Amendment, under what's called substantive due process, that people have a right to engage in consensual, intimate sexual activity. That includes oral and anal sex. That includes what's called sodomy. So nobody should be sort of subjected to the attendant sex offender registration consequences for that. So we feel confident that we'll win on that.
So you've won other cases against other states. And you gave their arguments. So there's actually been attorneys generals in other states that have said, even though you engaged in an act which was illegal by an unconstitutional law, you still should register as a sex offender.
I'll tell you right now, actively in courts today, Montana and Idaho are clinging to their sex offender registration laws. Now, Montana just says that people with convictions from Idaho who move to Montana have to register. I can tell you that Mississippi fought for years to keep them on. And I don't know what South Carolina's move is going to be, but yes, these states continue to fight it. I can tell you when the first case came to me, I went to the attorney generals and said, obviously, this is just a mistake. Let's just fix this. Who needs litigation? And they told me, you need to sue us. We're going to try to keep enforcing this.
It's stunning. It says so much without saying anything at all, really. Matthew, you've obviously dealt with Mr. Doe. We'd love to talk to him at some point and be happy to protect his identity. We understand if he doesn't want to. But through you, can you explain sort of how this is affected or, for that matter, ruined his life?
Yeah, I can't really tell you much about Mr. Doe because we don't say much about him in the complaint. And the more we say about him, the less the court might let us sort of go forward as a John Doe. But I can tell you about another client who we have in the same situation in Idaho and Montana. He's allowed his name to be out there. His name is Randall Mingus. Mr. Mingus was 17 years old and working on a sort of foster care ranch in Idaho. He aged out and the ranch let him stay there, and he was caught. There were two 16-year-old boys who were having sex with each other, and they sort of got him involved.
Okay. We don't need the details. I don't think anybody needs the details of the case. I guess my question is,
sure.
And it says, but clearly for Mr. Doe, he's having to abide by all of these restrictions is the idea.
Yeah, Mr. Doe's lucky in the sense that he is currently employed. A lot of these people, like Mr. Mingus, his life, hasn't been able to obtain employment. I mean, he was convicted in 1994. Wow. He's about my age. He's in his early 40s. He's been homeless most of his life. It's completely ruined his life. So different people, it's affected them different ways. Yeah. Some people are able to still maintain a normal lifestyle.
Matthew,
but a lot of people, it ruins everything.
Understandably so. Matthew Strugar, who's the attorney in this, you're doing great work. We really appreciate it. Keep us updated.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much for covering it.
This is an important case. Thank you. It's been 2 years since the pandemic started. Why we're still dealing with some of the exact same problems. See you on the other side of the break. Welcome back. It's been 2 years exactly 2 years since the first COVID case in America. and we have the exact same problems as we did then. The COVID news today is painfully incremental. A fourth shot's unlikely to help you. And all along, we might have been missing the miracle cure. CBD or an extract of marijuana might prevent you from getting the coronavirus. Nobody has all the answers. We've learned that. The experts have been wrong time and time and time again, not by their own fault, but just because things have changed. The messaging from the CDC, White House, and health authorities all over the world has been terrible. We could do a whole show just on that. We're not going to, but we could. The government is finally trying to send everybody tests. That took 2 years, and it's as Omicron is fading. And now they're going to send masks everywhere. Beginning next week, the Biden administration is going to start distributing 400 million N95 masks. Remember all the mask shortages in 2020? Well, they're back, and we're relying on the Chinese more than ever. Brian Enton is outside a plant in Miami trying to change that. It would be funny if it wasn't so sad and serious, Brian. And it seems like the guy who's trying to make masks in America is getting roadblocks from the very people who say they want to bring manufacturing to America.
Yeah, it's certainly very interesting, Leland. We came here to Dematech, this factory in Miami where they make masks. They go around the clock. They pump out thousands of masks. I was interviewing the owner and I said, well, you must be really busy lately because I hear that President Biden is sending out the 400 million masks nationwide. And he said, actually, no. Those masks are coming from the national stockpile, and most of those masks, we are told, are actually Chinese masks. They are not American-made like the masks made inside the building behind me. And the owner said there's a reason to be concerned about those Chinese masks. Listen to what he said.
They're cheap because they're subsidized by the Chinese government. They want to make sure that they control that part of the supply chain. It's dangerous in the sense that when COVID started spreading in the United States, the Chinese government shut off the valve, and our country wasn't receiving any N95s because they were all made in China. So it's absolutely essential for national security that these products be made in our country.
So what's going to be interesting now, Leland, is with President Biden taking all the masks out of the national stockpile and distributing them, they're going to have to refill the stockpile. And the owners of the American companies, like the one behind me, are hoping that the administration will buy American masks.
Yeah, I think we all would think that would be the obvious answer. Sometimes the government doesn't do the obvious thing. What was this guy doing before the pandemic? Was he making masks then as well, just not as many of them?
No, it's really interesting. They actually made sutures for people having surgery. That was the big family business inside this factory. When all of the hospitals shut down and there were no more elective surgeries, because all the COVID patients were in, they had to basically come up with a new business plan. And that's when they actually made the machines here to make the masks and started manufacturing masks.
That's fascinating, Brian. Every time you come on, you got something new, better, and interesting. It's why we keep having you back. Thank you, my friend. Have a great weekend, and stay on this story for us, all right? Let us know if he gets orders.
Thanks, yep.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. All right, sticking sort of in the medical world. One doctor says he has a way to make smoking crack. Yes, a doctor wants to make smoking crack cocaine safer, and he has an explanation of why it should be legal. Stick around. A few years ago, tobacco companies sold the world on e-cigarettes, newer, safer, and more efficient ways to deliver nicotine to your brain that would eventually help you quit smoking. Well, now one doctor came up with the crack pen. Rather than smoking cocaine, normally one could inhale the vapor like an e-cigarette. Dr. Fabian Steinmetz invented the crack pen. He works out of Germany. Joins us now. Thanks for staying up late, 2 a.m. there. This is your baby. Why should it be legal?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, thank you for having me.
Yeah.
I mean, we are talking about a medical device. The war on drugs has not worked, and we need alternatives. I mean, it's quite easy how to regulate cannabis, but it's more difficult how to deal with drugs like crack cocaine or heroin. And we actually learned from a lot of European cities like Zurich and Berlin, but also Bern, European cities, how you can actually give heroin to people who already have an addiction problem, who already have a substance use disorder. And by pharma-grade drugs, you actually decrease a lot of risks. And then we actually thought about how can we do something similar for crack cocaine, which has a very very short duration. And then we came up with this type of e-cigarette. But so far it's only a concept for a medical device. So nothing I'm developing in my garage and nothing I use or sell.
It's a fascinating point, and you make a great point. Of the war on drugs hasn't worked in the United States. You've got huge problems associated with buying drugs, using drugs. Benefits of the crack pens will not contain potentially harmful compounds, only contain crack and the vape juice, some kind of cocaine, will contain a specific dose, number of hits, and as you point out, available through a doctor's office. I got to say, though, OxyContin was available through a doctor's office, and that then created huge problems here in America, in Europe as well. How does the crack pen not do the same thing?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And it's actually very complex if you analyze the opioid crisis in the US or also in Canada. And there are two sides. And the media very often only reports the one side. I mean, the one where pharma sales reps are basically lying to physicians and then they prescribe OxyContin instead of aspirin and ibuprofen, etc. This is one part of the truth, but the other part is prohibition. I mean, this is the reason why people, if they don't get their pills, go to the black market and then they poison themselves with illegal fentanyl formulations. And maybe for the US, if you would like to launch such a product, you would need some extra rules. For example, I don't see a point for prescription drug advertisement in TV. This is something in Europe rather uncommon, and I definitely would not like anyone to advertise for any psychoactive substances at all.
Yeah, I'm probably not going out on a limb here to think that you wouldn't really have to advertise this. If for a certain population you offered legal cocaine, people would find you in that case. But you sort of are also looking both at the way that Zurich and other cities have dealt with drugs, but then there's this argument about the way people have been trying to quit smoking cigarettes. Success rates for different methods to quit smoking. E-cigarettes is only at 13%. The patch and nicotine gum are north of 20%. And obviously quitting cold turkey is only 5%. Would it not be better to find a way to sort of give people not the exact same high? If you're handing them cocaine and vape juice, it just feels like people are going to use more cocaine. Why wouldn't they use more cocaine?
I mean, the main harm reduction is to have a controlled substance, and because you get this from a doctor, you actually have a serious conversation about your health. I mean, we're talking about people who are homeless, who haven't seen a doctor for years. So by talking to a doctor, he actually can help you, for example, to lower a dose, to address comorbidities, to help you for example, find a social worker for you.
It's fascinating. If you actually get one to market, come back and talk to us about it. Unfortunately, Doc, we got to run. We only got a couple of seconds left. Thank you. Thanks for being with us this week. We'll see you on Monday. Dan's next. Thanks for watching. Click the red subscribe button below so you can get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.